Thank you for joining us today to watch this program, which explains to you who the false friends of Fatima are. Our guest today, of course, is the author of the book, The False Friends of Fatima, Mr. Christopher Ferreira. Welcome back.
Thank you, Father, for inviting me. It's been quite an exhaustive march through the pages of this saga of these people, high and low in the church, who, while professing to praise Fatima, have come to bury it.
Yes,
unlike Mark Antony, who came to praise Caesar, not to bury him.
Yeah, I've come to bury Caesar, not to bury him, but they ended up praising him. But they came to praise Fatima, but really they came to bury Fatima.
Exactly, Mark Antony in reverse. Yeah. So that's what we're dealing with. And we've gone through, in this episode, we'll go through some more of the material, but in prior episodes we've talked about the crisis in the church, the whole change in thinking among certain so-called enlightened churchmen, and how they have had to attempt to remold the message of Fatima to suit their new worldly, ecumenical, diplomatic orientation. We have a new message of Fatima in which the consecration of Russia doesn't involve Russia, and the third secret of Fatima belongs to the past, and we have peace. What you see is what you get. Don't worry about the state of the world. And we've seen how the Vatican Secretary of State has orchestrated this party line on Fatima, which basically consigns all of the explicitly prophetic Catholic elements of Fatima to the past and tells everybody just to pray and do penance, which of course is important, but that's all there is to the message of Fatima so far as the party line is concerned. And then we've talked about people from below who are implementing the party line from on high, such as the Blue Army, which surrendered in the early 1980s and basically stopped calling for the consecration of Russia. And this curious fellow, Carlos Evaristo, someone with a grade school education who somehow was given unprecedented access to Lucy, so he could come out of the convent with pamphlets, one of which he admitted was essentially a fabrication, and the other of which has never been corroborated, in which Sister Lucy is saying all of these strange things that contradict her entire testimony.
For 70 years.
Yeah, and then we moved ahead to the press conference in 2000, where the Vatican, after the announcement by Cardinal Sodano at Fatima in May of 2000, published the vision, then proceeded to explain, quote-unquote, the vision based on Cardinal Sodano's interpretation, which is patently ridiculous for the reasons.
And even there, Cardinal Sodano, telling us that the vision is going to be released in the near future, says the Pope falls apparently dead. Well, in the vision that they did publish, it wasn't apparently dead. The Pope was killed, is what it says in the actual writing of
close enough for government work. The government of the Vatican city-state. The Cardinal Secretary says, well, you almost died, that's good enough. So we'll just rely on him because he's the oracle of Fatima. Meanwhile, he's hushing up the Maciel scandal, which finally Pope Benedict took charge of, and even as Cardinal Ratzinger, just before he became Pope, he basically said, enough of the cover-up, Sodano, I'm going to start this investigation again. And when that investigation was started up, it culminated in the shipping off of Maciel to a monastery, where he died in disgrace, which was his just punishment. But now, moving ahead from this Vatican press conference, the party line was reaffirmed. There was a funeral for Fatima, as I call it. Only Fatima wasn't buried. You can't bury it. It's the message of Our Lady of Fatima, the Mother of God. So it's not going to be buried. Nevertheless, there are people who are gamely attempting to carry forward the party line.
Just think of all the energy they put into this.
Yeah.
They actually, we're such a small operation. We hardly can struggle from month to month to keep ourselves going. And if they took the prestige and the wealth of the Vatican to promote the message of Fatima, so everyone would know about it, that it's their lives, their freedom, and their souls are at stake if the message is not implemented, just think how far well off the world would be.
Well, now you have these other organizations, lay organizations that are sort of competitors to yours, claiming the mantle of legitimacy. And one of them is, which I discuss in Chapter 8, is the apostolate of Father Fox, the late Father, what's his first name?
Father Robert.
Robert Fox.
Bobby J is one of the priests I know.
Robert J. Fox, he's passed away, may God rest his soul, but while he was alive, he was your nemesis of sorts. He had kind of a rival Fatima apostolate. His Fatima apostolate was devoted to promoting the party line. And just to recapitulate, the party line is the third secret. It doesn't involve a pope being killed by a band of soldiers, which is what the vision shows. No, it's John Paul II not being killed.
Yeah, in May 1981.
The consecration of Russia, number 2, according to the party line, doesn't require the mention of Russia. You can consecrate Russia without mentioning Russia.
You can consecrate the world that covers Russia, so it's okay.
Yeah,
it's all done.
And then thirdly, since Russia was consecrated without mentioning Russia, and since the third secret has been interpreted to mean exactly what the vision doesn't say, Well, now that's all over with. So Fatima today is prayer and penance.
And everything else is in the past.
Prayer and penance. So this is Father Fox's program. His rival, Fatima Apostolate, is to promote the party line.
Well, now when you talk about Father Fox, I still remember watching a video clip of Father Fox. Father Fox was asked about, is the consecration been done? And this video was done about year 2000, 2002, something like that, just a few years before he died. And he says yes. Then the question is asked at the very end of the clip. The interviewer, although he's off the camera, he's asked, "Are you concerned about anything in the world today?" Oh yes, there's a danger of war. So here you have Father Fox saying the consecration of Russia is done, but he's also saying that we're in danger of war.
Well, it's double talk. But when we talked about the party line earlier in this series, that's the very nature of the party line. The party line is 2 + 2 = 5. You must affirm.
The party line ultimately affirms an absurdity, says the absurdity is the truth.
War is peace. Father Fox is saying we have the period of peace, but now we're in danger of war.
Yeah.
It's absolute, utter nonsense, a self-negating proposition.
Well, I remember Father Gobi saying to me one day, it was private, and Father Gobi's gone to his rest, but he said to me, "Is Father Fox trying to make the Blessed Virgin out to be a liar?" And I mean, he was very insightful, because here you have Father Fox on the one hand saying the consecration is done, but Our Lady's not going to keep her word because we could have war. If Our Lady says we're going to have a period of peace, at least it means there's not going to be any more war.
Yeah, it's like a game of 3-card Monte.
Yeah.
You're being tricked.
Yeah.
The cards are moving around so fast that you can't keep track of what he's saying from one day to the next, even though he's contradicting himself. He hopes that no one will notice. Now, I mentioned that his apostolate was kind of a nemesis of yours, the anti-Fatima apostolate. And one of the things he thought he had to do in order to advance the party line was to attack you personally. And I remember an article he wrote, and I discussed it in the book. Father Gruner, a suspended Catholic priest, the screaming headline. Well, are you suspended, Father Gruner?
Well, I think you know that better than I am, Chris, since you've appealed my case before the Supreme Court. I mean, actually, to be technically correct, we had a lawyer who was accredited with the case, but you did all the preparation for him, and he looked it all over, and he said, this is perfectly good stuff, and he put his name to it, basically. So you know the case better than I do. Although, yes, no, I'm not suspended, never have been suspended, because as the Catholic Church teaches, first of all, that, and it's in the new Code of Canon Law, despite there are people that think that some things are wrong with the new code compared to the old code, in the new code, I suspect it's the old code as well, says a priest, or a bishop for that matter, or a layperson, cannot be punished with an ecclesiastical punishment if there's not been an ecclesiastical crime committed. Since I've committed no crime, there can be no punishment.
Let's just give the viewers a nutshell and leave it at that, and we'll move on, because it's an argumentum ad hominem. He's attacking you personally. And frankly, even if you were suspended, it wouldn't matter to the merits of what you're saying about Fatima. But let's dispense with it right now with it by giving it in a nutshell. You were told by your bishop in Italy, where you were originally ordained in 1978, that he was under pressure from the Vatican Secretary of State.
Yeah.
Wow, what a coincidence.
Cardinal Casarola, to be precise.
Yes, at that time. And then it became Cardinal Sodano,
yes,
who hounded you because your Fatima apostolate was telling the truth about Fatima and making it impossible for him to close the books on Fatima. So a little scheme was devised. Your bishop said he had gotten worried signals from the Vatican Secretary of State. And the bishop, under pressure from the Secretary of State, said, either you come back to Italy from Canada, where your apostolate is, where I've let you be for all these many years.
For over 10, 15 years.
Or you find another bishop to incarnate you. Well, you did find another bishop to incarnate you.
I found 3 at least. I mean, I found more than 3, but I got 3 in writing.
3 in writing, and the Secretary of State systematically intimidated 2 of the 3 not to incarnate you and to withdraw their office. But one of them, let's leave him nameless for purposes of this broadcast, although people who want the documentation can contact us, did incarnate you in writing, and despite intimidation from the Vatican Secretary of State, reaffirmed his degree of incarnation. And you're incarnated in that archdiocese to this day.
Correct.
And evidently, certain people in the Vatican who pursued this ridiculous persecution have essentially given up. They might refer back to the proceedings of 1995, 1996, whatever year that was. But the fact is, you're duly incarnated in this diocese. In fact, your apostolate has been lending material support to that diocese for many years.
But the Secretary of State is still, even in 2000 or 2001, still came out with lies about my status in public about it. But they haven't said anything for years, thank God. So for their own sake, they may lose their soul for doing something
Well,
like
you
that.
know, at a level higher than the Pope, higher than the Secretary of State, rather, we have this fellow called the Supreme Pontiff, known as the Pope. And the Pope has a secretary. John Paul II had a secretary, Archbishop Dejevich. And in 1996, you received a note.
Well, I received 3 letters from him.
Well, let me read from one of them. It was a personal greeting, and it said that it conveyed the Pope's prayerful good wishes and blessings for the new year to you and the faithful entrusted to your care at the Fatima Center. Now, this was handwritten, was it not?
Yeah, in fact, we'll show them on the screen, these letters. So some of them were typed and with handwritten additions to them. I don't have them right in front of me here, but yes.
There's no question that Archbishop Dejevich knows who you are and
Yes.
knew it back in 1996. You couldn't have been a more obvious presence in the Vatican. You had filed recourses there. In fact, Archbishop Dejevich received in his own hand, as shown by a photograph taken by L'Osservatore Romano, your canonical appeal to the Pope.
That's right.
He knows exactly who you are.
One of the 3, I've got a...
Maybe you can put that up on the screen at some point.
Well, you got a picture of Joseph Kane handing to the Pope and Archbishop Dejevich taking it from Joseph, and we have the document there. It's in the book about me, Fatima priest, and actually who signed it? There's 2 documents given that day, and they have a picture captured on camera one of those 2 documents.
Well, this just shows the melodrama that's going on in the Vatican, where the third secret in the form of the vision is published and the Pope is not there. It's all done by the Secretary of State. Where the Pope is at Fatima in May of 2000, but he sits there silently while the Secretary of State speaks. And now we have the Secretary of State hounding and persecuting you. But meanwhile, the Pope's personal secretary is sending you a note of thanks. And he had to know who you were and who exactly he was thanking. So there's a kind of an imprisonment in the Vatican. The Pope is imprisoned. He's a prisoner of the Vatican bureaucracy. And Pope Benedict is famously said to have observed to Bishop Fillet of the Society of St. Pius X during an audience, I believe it was in 2005 in Castel Gandolfo, when they were alone for a moment. Bishop Fillet said, "Your Holiness, you're the Pope. You could set these things right in the church. The consecration of Russia, the third secret, the state of the liturgy." And the Pope said to Bishop Fillet, "My authority ends at that door."
In other words, in the room he was sitting in, the Pope can command what happens in his presence, but beyond that door, someone else commands, and it's the Secretary of State.
That's only a perception. The Pope, the poet Robert Blake speaks of mind-forged manacles, manacles that we impose on ourselves. They're only in our minds.
Yes.
But he could throw off those shackles in an instant. He doesn't have to let the Secretary of State run rampant and take control of the message of Fatima.
But that's how he feels, at least. Very least he feels that
And
way.
we'll see as we get toward the end of this series how the Pope finally does do that. But let's save that.
To some extent.
Save that to some extent for the end. But then Father Fox goes on to say, let's put aside your personal status, which I think is clear enough. It wouldn't matter anyway. It's an argumentum ad hominem. He goes on to challenge you in the same article. It would be interesting to see, he says, how many millions of dollars Father Gruner has collected over the years. Well, anybody can see that. These are public records. But I asked the question, how many millions did Father Fox raise to pay tribute to Fatima while burying it? That's what I would like to know.
Well, this television program alone, on the air full time, over the years, is going to cost well over millions of dollars. I mean, and we don't see. I don't see a penny of. I mean, I see it passing through me. I don't get a benefit. I don't get 1 cent of that.
Well, I've known you for quite a while. In the interest of full disclosure, we're not exactly strangers. We've been close collaborators for many years, and I can tell the viewers that I've stayed in your home. Your home is a modest home. The floors are not even level. It's a very humble house. You drive around in a car that is a stripper. You don't have
what's a stripper?
Nothing in it.
There's no air conditioning. That's true.
Yeah, you don't have any luxuries at all. It's
2000. It's 10
rather
years.
annoying, in fact.
It's 9 years old. It's still running very well.
And your idea of a luxury is a nice home-cooked dinner of simple food at night. Yeah. You're not a man who luxuriates in anything. Everything goes into the apostolate. I've seen you spend 3 hours a day praying. I don't want to embarrass you on the air, but that's the Father Gruner I know. This idea that you're raising millions for your own personal benefit is preposterous. I mean, you're practically killing yourself with exhaustion. I'm always telling you, take a weekend off. And you look better now than you have in a while because you had some sleep over the last few days. Yeah. People don't know this, and they should know it. But so I asked the question, what exactly has Father Fox done with his millions? I'll tell you what he's done. I go over this in the book. He's basically promoted to the hilt the neo-modernist deconstruction of Fatima. Now, we've already talked about what modernists are. Modernists are the ones who redefine everything. Nothing means the same. They use the vocabulary.
The same words, but...
They'll talk about the Immaculate Heart, but they don't mean the Immaculate Heart. They just mean being pure. It's not the Immaculate Heart of Mary, which is unique in the universe. It's anybody. You can be pure and you'll have an Immaculate Heart too. They don't mean the consecration of Russia. They mean just some sort of ceremony in which you mention the whole world. No need to mention Russia. They don't mean the conversion of Russia when they say conversion. They just mean that Russia becomes, there's a regime change. And now we have, consumer goods in Moscow. And Putin's a regular guy. There's no conversion to Catholicism, though. The triumph of the Immaculate Heart? Well, that happened when Mary said yes to the request of the angel. That was 2,000 years ago. So they use all the vocabulary.
When she says, well, of course, they're smart enough to take out the word, my Immaculate will triumph, to say, it's a famous phrase, the triumph of the Immaculate Heart. But then they redefine that to something 2,000 years ago when she's talking about something that takes place in the future.
Yeah, well, the future is, in their lexicon, the future means the past. The Immaculate Heart means your heart. Consecration of Russia means not consecrating Russia. And peace means war. This is literally what they are asking us to swallow.
But in turn, I'd like to get back to something we mentioned in the program before, which is Father Danis, at least he was logical. I mean, he was not true, but he was logical. He says, taking the principle that St. Augustine has enunciated, God does not bind us to doing the impossible. So if God asked me to climb, up Mount Everest on my bare hands and feet, I think most people would say that would be impossible for me to do. God would not ask me to do that because it's impossible to do. However, he then takes this principle, which is a good moral principle, and says, well, the message of Fatima asking for the consecration of Russia can't be true because it's impossible for them to do. Well, the bottom line is, who says it's impossible? Let's just go through this impossibility for a moment. John Paul II had, for the whole year, on October the 8th, 2000, he had 1,500 bishops. He didn't order them, he just invited them. He asked them to come to the consecration. Some of them wrote to me saying, we're going to do the consecration of Russia when we get there in October. They were badly deceived. However, we can tell there was a conflict going on in the Vatican because every other time they always put the text out months ahead of time. The text of this public consecration was only published within less than 24 hours before they actually did the consecration of that day. My point being, if you can get 1,500 bishops to come to do a consecration, they didn't even know what they're consecrating, but they're willing to do it. That's 1/3, a little less than 1/3, is 1,500 of 5,000 coming. Now, the second thing, I write to the bishops. I write to the bishops once a month. And it turns out to be more like 10 times a year. The bishops have written me, and of course every year we have about 110 bishops dying and 110 bishops or a bit more taking their places. But over the years, we have over 2,000 bishops writing to us. And the number of bishops who are willing to do it, I've even had bishops say, I don't want to do it, but if the Pope asked me or told me to do it, I would do it. But you can't use my name. And just like the Cardinal wrote to me, Father Gruner, I think your work is a work of providence, but you can't use my name. So, I mean, they're afraid of something, whatever they're afraid of. But the point is that if the Pope asked them, they would do it. But where does the impossibility come from? It's from the Secretary of State. We had a bishop at our Mexican conference in 1994 saying, the opposition to consecration of Russia is from one place. It's the Secretary of State.
We proved that from a book written by one of the false friends of Fatima, Father Apostoli, in his book Fatima for Today, which really means Fatima for yesterday, because that's the party line. He quotes Bishop Joseph Cordes. Bishop Joseph Cordes said, and we mentioned this in a previous segment, that John Paul II wanted to consecrate Russia, but that his collaborators persuaded him to abandon the idea. They admit this. John Paul II didn't think he was consecrating Russia. No, he was persuaded to abandon the idea. How do you do something you've been persuaded to abandon? Can't have it both ways. Well, I think so they've destroyed their own case in this book by Father Apostoli.
This reminds me of something else. They say, well, you can't really blame Pope Benedict XVI for not doing the consecration. If Pope John Paul II wouldn't do it, and Paul VI wouldn't do it. But the one thing that is against the present Pope that the other popes don't have is the hindsight. The people said the consecration of 1984 was the consecration, Our Lady will fulfill her promise. That's almost 28 years ago now. Well, we haven't had world peace. We've had, and not to say this is the limit of it, but you have the attack on Iran and Kuwait in 1990. You have Desert Storm number 2 in 2003. You got Afghanistan. You got people dying. There's people dying from drones going over their head, killing people. Acts of war like this. We don't have peace. We haven't had peace. We got, since 1984, we've had at least 1 billion babies killed in the biggest war mankind's ever seen, in the war of abortion against the unborn. No one can say we've had peace. If someone wants to say that, I mean, they're either fools or they think we're stupid. I don't know, one or the other. They're either knaves or idiots. The point is, at the end of the day, we don't have peace. After 28 years, who's going to connect the so-called peace we're going to get tomorrow from the 1984 consecration? It didn't happen. It's got to be obvious to anybody. At least the Pope, the present Pope, has the benefit of hindsight that John Paul II doesn't have. He can look back and say, by the way, we haven't had peace. Oh, well, I guess we didn't do the consecration right. That will be held against him more than his predecessor. And when we see war breaking out, when we see bombs starting to drop, when you see the annihilation of nations starting to take place, they say, why don't they just do this simple little thing? If they think they got a PR problem right now with Father Gruner saying, by the way, you didn't do the consecration, what's it going to be like then? When all these people say, my father died, my mother died, my sister died, my brother died, my husband died, my wife died, all because, and it could have been prevented by this consecration.
Well, that you're talking about the obvious, but it's a denial of the obvious that's at the heart of this whole party line on Fatima. And Father Fox, confronted with the obvious, evades it. Let me give you an example from the book. He was hounded by many people with the question, there are still wars and violence in the world, and Russia is far from converted. If the consecration is accomplished, why is Russia not converted? That was the title of one of his articles. And his answer is to sneer at the idea of Russia's conversion. He rejected those who, quote, hold to a position that a paradise on earth, a Russia suddenly turning itself into a people of converted holiness, and even as Roman Catholics, must immediately follow a collegial consecration. Well, but that's what a miracle is.
Yeah, well,
Our Lady came to promise a miracle like the conversion of Mexico.
Well, exactly.
After Our Lady of Guadalupe appeared.
Well, first of all, the Blessed Virgin Mary does not come down from heaven to say we're going to convert Russia from regime of Mikhail Gorbachev to Mr. Yeltsin, or from Mr. Yeltsin to Mr. What's his name now, Putin. It's okay. Who cares? You still have the same materialistic outlook. It happens to be Western style, more than it was before, but that doesn't change. Our Lady didn't come down to bring about the conversion of Russia to Westernism or Western style materialism. She came to save their souls. If you look at the vision of hell, you have these poor souls in hell burning there for all eternity, and she wants to prevent that. And she's going to come. She's going to be satisfied with coming down so we can have a regime change from Gorbachev to Putin. I don't think so.
Well, what this comes down to, and maybe Father Fox never understood this, but what he was really saying, what all of these false friends of Fatima are saying when they sneer at the idea of Russia's conversion, is that God cannot bring about the conversion of Russia. That's essentially what they're saying. Well, and Our Lady said there would be a conversion. No, that can't happen, meaning that God can't do it. Well, because she is the Mother of God, the mediatrix of His graces.
The second thing is that, this is not to be anti-Russian to say that the whole world needs conversion. Our Lord Himself in the message of Fatima, He says, Russia, Spain, Portugal, Europe, and the world. God knows, our Lord knows that they all need conversion. However, He's going to bring about the conversion of the whole world in an orderly fashion. First, by the consecration of Russia, Russia's conversion to God, followed by, because of their conversion, they become missionaries to the whole world, and the rest of the world converts also.
And not conversion to orthodoxy. And this is another gimmick that Father Fox deployed. Oh, well, okay, there's no conversion to Catholicism. Well, God really can't do that. Let's be serious here. But, the people are returning to the Orthodox faith in Russia. First of all, they aren't. 94% of the Russian Orthodox don't even practice their faith.
And you're taking that number from the Russian Orthodox bishops themselves saying this.
Right. But he also said, well, we can be satisfied with the return to orthodoxy, which is a fiction, because the Orthodox Church is a sister church of the Catholic Church.
Even the doctrine has been denied.
One problem with that, Father Fox. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, under Cardinal Ratzinger, declared on June 9th, 2000, putting an end to this nonsense. Quote, one cannot properly say that the Catholic Church is the sister of a particular church or group of churches. Consequently, one should avoid as a source of misunderstanding and theological confusion the use of such formulations as our two churches, which, if applied to the Catholic Church and the totality of Orthodox churches, or a single Orthodox church, imply a plurality not merely on the level of particular churches, but on the level of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, confessed in the Creed, whose real existence is thus obscured.
Yes, absolutely.
So Father Fox was completely
Of
demolished.
course, he's also, he's not a theologian with all respect to him.
Well, you know, there's more I suppose we could say about Father Fox, and I guess we get to that in the next episode. But basically, his operation, the operation of his apostolate was designed as a bait and switch operation. Our Lady came and promised one thing, we're going to give you another. And we're going to see that pattern repeated again and again as we go through these discussions.
And Father Fox, by the way, would admit that he was starting his apostolate because somebody in the Vatican asked to. So that somebody in the Vatican, I suppose, is the same somebody that put Evaristo up to having these fake interviews with Sister Lucy. That somebody, I suspect, would be somebody related to the Secretary of State, since they've all had this aversion to Fatima, because it goes directly against the powers of the world. And of course, the Secretary of State is dealing with the powers of the world. And so for them to get what they want, they say, well, the powers of the world, we'll give you what you want. Well, shut up about Fatima, shut up about the heirs of Russia, and we're happy. So the Secretary of State is imposing the powers of the world on Fatima and fighting against Fatima. And that's where the false friends of Fatima come from, ultimately, as your book very well points out. I see we're running out of time. I would like to point out one thing, though. That Cardinal Bertoni, the future Secretary of State, says, the decision of His Holiness, John Paul II, to make public the third part of the secret of Fatima brings an end to the period of history marked by tragic human lust and power, human lust for power and evil. It's obvious that we haven't had the human lust for power and evil ended, but Cardinal Bertoni obviously is trying to have us believe that just because the Pope decided to release the secret, then why wouldn't he do it 40 years before? But secondly, where's the end for lust for power and evil? It's more evident than ever. Remember, the false friends of Panama are some of the people that you've learned to trust, not knowing any better. You have to know who the false friends of Fatima are so that you can protect your soul against their errors, their lies. Remember to pray the rosary every day. God bless you.